are giving in Africa, but they haven't reached out to peers to get their advice. Now, because of the African Philanthropy Forum, they have a ready network of peers who care as much as they do about this set of issues, but have a much deeper knowledge of on-the-ground realities, what works, what doesn't work in their context.
And I think that there's an intervention necessary, an intervention by people who are prepared to put their money and say, we want to make a change.
Once that realization comes to you that you have a duty to give back, that you should give back, then the question becomes, how do you go about it?
I heard Kim Belosage's story or heard Manu Chandare's story, and it made me realize that I could actually do the same thing. So what APF is doing is almost creating that spark in the heart and the mind of these African high net worth individuals to want to give back systematically, leave a legacy beyond their lifetime.
Building more philanthropists, be it small or big, what we're doing now is using giving as a means of inspiring giving and transformation.
On behalf of the African Philanthropy Forum, I would like to warmly welcome you to our 2017 annual conference. We're so excited to have you here. I'm excited because you're in Lagos, my city, and you're in Nigeria, our country. As many of you know, the African Philanthropy Forum is a network of social investors and philanthropists who are committed to sustainable and inclusive development on the continent. And so it is such a joy to see all of you gathered in this room today, and we're looking forward to engaging, learning, and sharing experiences over the next 48 hours. I'm personally looking forward to connecting with all of you, if I can, in the next hours. We have a fantastic lineup of activities. If you're not on WOVA, get on WOVA. Those on WOVA are having an amazing time already. Their conference began a week ago when we launched WOVA, so get on WOVA today. And to move straight into the conference, I would like to invite an amazing woman that I met about a year ago. And I've had the honor and pleasure to serve under her leadership in the past few months as we have worked to establish the African Philanthropy Forum as an independent entity on the African continent. Her commitment to the development of Africa is unwavering. Her tenacity is unbelievable. And for those of you who know her, you will agree with me that her passion is contagious. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to warmly welcome the pioneer board chair of the African Philanthropy Forum, Mrs. Sisi Masiyiwa.
A very nice introduction, I must say. Thank you, Mohsen. Good morning, everybody. Are you excited to be here this morning? Yes. Okay, tell your neighbor, I'm glad I came to this conference. Now, so you have two neighbors, you have to do it twice. Awesome, thank you. So I want to give you again a very, very warm welcome to our conference 2017. Africa Philanthropy in a changing global context is our theme for this year. I want to say thank you so much to those of you who have been attending our conferences in the previous years, and also welcome to those of you who are attending the conference for the very first time. Who has been in the last conferences we held in Rwanda, in Ethiopia, in Morocco? Yeah, give them a very warm clap. Thank you, welcome. And who's attending for the first time? Woo! That's wonderful. I would also want to give a really warm welcome to and acknowledge the presence of Jane Wales, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Global Philanthropy Forum, through whose vision, Jane, this is your vision. You created the APF. It is your baby. You gave birth to us, and we want to honor you and to say thank you so much for believing in this. Jane has a team, Susie, who's not here, who's also been very actively involved in organizing previous conferences, and I want to also acknowledge the awesome and passionate work that Susie has contributed to getting us to where we are. I want to recognize a few people. I know everybody is important. All of you had to cancel something to prioritize coming to this event. But for the sake of protocol, there's some people I need to recognize for their presence. First of all, I want to recognize George Wena, who's the Minister of Education and Chair of the Interministerial Scholarship Committee of the Government of Liberia. General Theophilus Dajuma, who's Chairman of the T.Y. Dajuma Foundation. Queen Tandekile Ndlovu Zwelithini, Queen of the Zulu Kingdom of the Republic of South Africa. We recognize Her Royal Highness Queen Sylvia from Uganda. We also recognize Her Excellency Toyin Saraki, who is the founder and president of the Wellbeing Foundation Africa. We recognize Ambassador Stuart Symington. He's the U.S. Ambassador to Nigeria and former U.S. Special Representative. I also want to give a very big thank you to our supporters and our sponsors, which include the Dangote Foundation. Thank you for your phenomenal contribution. Thank you so much to Owando Foundation. MTN Nigeria, we are grateful for your contribution. Thank you so much, Bill Campbell, the Campbell Family Foundation, for your contribution. Thank you to the Global Philanthropy Forum, Jane. We are so grateful for what you've contributed to make this possible. And there's another foundation called Highlight. We also want to say thank you to the support we've received from the media. Business Day Nigeria, you are awesome, we are grateful. Grateful to The Guardian, Nigeria, Ebony Life TV, thank you, and Ventures Africa, we are so grateful. This is the first time we are holding the APF conference as an independent entity. And since the beginning of this year, we've established an office in Lagos, which is run by Mosun Layode, who you just met. She has energy. I know Mosun hasn't slept. Her energy is amazing. She got on the ground running, and the things that she's been able to achieve in a short space of time can only be done by somebody who's living her vision and her dreams. So thank you for that. We have a cohort of 4 board members. 4 board members who include Her Royal Highness Queen Sylvia, Benga Oyabode, who's founder and chairman of Aluko and Oyabode, a law firm who've also been very important in giving us the support we need, technical expertise to get the organization registered and to get it going. Thank you so much, Ndidi, who's the founder of Leap Africa, co-founder of Ace Food Processing and Distribution. She's a former director of APF, and also she's part of Sahel Capital Partners and Advisory. Ndidi, your energy is contagious. So you think I'm contagious, I got it from Ndidi, okay. So we are excited also through the generosity of all the sponsors, but you know what excites me is people paid to come to this conference. We received sponsorship, and this conference is fully funded. I just want to do a quick run through of the events that we've held in the last 8 months. As Mosun mentioned earlier, she joined on the 1st of April. And in that period, we've successfully held an APF learning session in Johannesburg, South Africa, which was attended by 170 philanthropists, entrepreneurs, and leaders from all over the continent. We successfully held a regional meeting in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, which was attended by 42 current and aspiring philanthropists. And recently, a couple of weeks ago, we had an afternoon tea with 55 Nigerian entrepreneurs, leaders, and philanthropists in Lagos, leading up to this conference. I just have a few remarks I would like to make, which I hope will lay the stage for the upcoming 2 days. I'd like to start with the good news. So, depending on which part of the media you've been listening to, we've been hearing some good things that are happening on the African continent, where the economies that are taking off, economies like Rwanda, if you've been there, you will be inspired. If you haven't been there, make sure you buy your ticket and make your way there to see what has happened in Rwanda in a short space of time. Incredible stuff continues to happen in countries like Botswana, in your countries like Mozambique. I come from Zimbabwe, so we are in the wings, okay? We'll be on the list next year, I promise. But 3 countries that really stand out, according to a World Bank Global Outlook Report 2017, Ethiopia, Ghana, and Cote d'Ivoire. Why do they stand out? They are growing right now at a rate of 8% and are forecasted to maintain that growth or surpass it for the next 3 years. And there are all sorts of factors that are driving the growth. I'll leave that to the economists to talk about. However, in the midst of the above growth, sub-Saharan Africa faces a number of challenges on its pathway to socio-economic growth. And I want to highlight 4 pressure points. Number 1, youth unemployment. According to a UNICEF report, Generation 2030 Report 2.0, I'll share with you what they say 2050 looks like. Number 1, Africa's inhabitants will double from 1.2 billion in 2016 to 2.5 billion people. So 1 in every 4 people you'll meet anywhere will be African. I don't know whether we should clap or look down in despair. But I'm the ultimate optimist. We clap. 40% of the world's children under 18 will live in Africa. We are facing, so the question to ask is, are we facing the brutal facts? Just remember, without employment, the youth become your greatest security risk for any nation or continent. The second pressure point is traditional jobs have been disrupted by digitization, and the upcoming wave in technological advances like artificial intelligence and robotics raises a number of issues, including impact on future jobs. So to what extent are our education systems and institutions on the African continent prepared to face these changes? To what extent are governments willing to respond to these changes with the right policies? Is the private sector weighing in with its own strategic input to confront the changes? The third pressure point, slow economic growth. Sub-Saharan Africa's GDP per capita at constant 2005 prices was $1,036 in 2014 and growing at 1.4%. If we maintain the growth, it will take 50 years to double the per capita to $2,072, nowhere near where Singapore was in 1965 or Jamaica in 1960. So I think this kind of like gives us a good reminder of why we are all gathered here, right? Then the fourth pressure point is the leadership and governance. We have a global leadership crisis, but it's even more apparent on the continent. The tough questions we have to ask ourselves as leaders are, number 1, do we have the vision to confront the crisis? Do we have the will to make the tough calls that are truly transformational? Do we have the resources to sustain the changes that need to be made? And are we willing to take the long-term view, even if it means foregoing short-term benefits? Now, do I have answers to these? I think there are possibilities and options I would like to put forward to you that I think would be great if we considered for the next 2 days. In the next few days, I would like us to think about the critical partnerships between the public sector and the private sector. Governments can never solve all our problems. They were never meant to solve our problems, and they never will have the capacity to do that. They have an important role to play, but they are not our saviors. The private sector is an essential driver of the economic engine of any nation, and therefore has to play the relevant and strategic role that takes into account the local environment from which it operates. The challenges the African continent faces are too hard and too complex to be left to one player. So the private sector has to step in a strong and a very meaningful way. We need to get social issues being discussed in board meetings as opposed to making it an agenda for those who are involved in development. On the philanthropic front, Africans are extremely generous people. Each person in this room can attest to sending their relative to school or looking after members of the extended family. However, we have to be more strategic and more structured in the way we give and the way we engage philanthropy. We can't wait until we retire and have set aside money for future generations or to put into trusts. We have to give as we make the money. I would like to testify that our programs, when I look at some of the programs that some foundations are doing on the ground very effectively, Dajuma Foundation, Dangote Foundation, they've been very effective on the ground when institutions set aside differences they have with governments. Let me tell you, I think I come from the most complicated government in the world, but we work with them. We find common ground. The synergies are multiplied when we partner, and especially when private companies come to the table. And I couldn't emphasize that more. We have case studies where we have tried this, and we can bear witness. And there's some of you, during the next few days, will have an opportunity to talk about where some of these partnerships have really worked effectively. The last issue on the leadership. We all know that we need to take greater responsibilities for our problems by creating synergies that enable us to solve problems that seem greater than us. And yet, this is the very area where we have grave shortcomings on the continent. So how do we face the challenges? We should face, I think we should face the brutal facts about what is the type of leader that we are now, and have the courage to define the type of leader that puts us in a position of serving. What I mean by that is being a leader who works tirelessly to find ways to transform a vision into clear goals and actions without expecting validation, accolades, and recognition. We need to put serving first. Now, a group of us got together a couple of weeks ago to do just that, to confront the brutal facts about ourselves and look at what are some of the things that prevent us from being effective and being leaders who are well-positioned and geared to serve our communities. It was amazing what we came up with. Here are some of the brutal facts we realized we had to confront. You know, it's always easier to look at the government and think they are the worst leaders that we've ever had, but when we brutally look at ourselves, I think it gives us a much easier way to confront issues. Things that came up where we don't want to tell each other the truth and are overly diplomatic. We overestimate our capability, a false sense of security or being better. That sometimes we have a delusion of excellence and what excellence is. Many times we don't take counsel or advice because we know it all. Many times we cling to power. So I'm counting my tenure as chair of APF. When it's time to go, I will go. We don't take responsibility or are accountable for the actions we take. And sometimes we just overreact negatively when we make mistakes. The list could go on and on. So I want to encourage each of us to go through, in this conference, to go through, to see this as a safe space where we can face the brutal facts and be able to engage in a deep and meaningful way, so that we can really come up with solutions that are effective and solutions that really work. This is not a one-day matter, let me say. And this is neither something that we can start and finish within a workshop. Instead, let this be the start of a journey which will lead us as philanthropists to become more humble as leaders and to be more committed, especially in a financial sense, to bringing real change to our continent. As the African Philanthropy Network, we also recognize the critical role of networking. That's why we're here. We need to know each other and create a platform that allows us to share solutions, ideas, and amplify our voices, because all of us in the room are blessed to be people of influence and with voices that can be heard in different spheres of society. And also we have convening power. So I'll ask you this morning to sit back and keep at the back of your mind just two things. How can you actively be part of this public-private sector partnership? And how can you, or how can we face the brutal facts as we look at African philanthropy in a changing global context? With those few words, I would like to introduce to you the next speaker, who is Jane Wales, who will be doing the next session and will also share a few words. And as I said before, Jane is the founder of the Global.
We weren't conferring on how to manage the steps in high heels, but thank you for being the canary in the mine. So I'm really here to say congratulations. Congratulations to everyone in the room, to Mosun, to Tsitsi, to the full board for their extraordinary leadership and ability to make this happen. So I'm coming here from Arizona, which is not normally where I'm coming from. I was speaking at a conference there, and a woman came up to me and said, well, if you're leaving, are you going home to San Francisco? And I said, no, I'm going to Lagos. I'm going to Nigeria. And she said, oh my gosh, is that a beautiful spot? Is that where Fela Kuti sang? Is that where Adichie wrote from? Is that the Nigeria that this conference is about? And my response was, well, it's about Nigeria, but it's not only about Nigeria. It's about Africa. And so when I answer the question of what is it like, I have to find a word that covers every country, every culture of the African continent. And that was easy. The word is generosity. And it's that combination of generosity and strategy. It's the combination of generosity and strategy that the African Philanthropy Forum is betting upon. And it's a pretty good bet. And seeing all the folks that are in the room is a reminder of that. It's especially fun for me to be here because I see all these dear friends that I've known over the years. And it's so wonderful to travel this far and feel so much at home. Tsitsi, of course, that's Toyin Saraki, Queen Sylvia, Maima Belasaji is here, Zuera from Dangote, Mamadou, Muihaki, who made a bet on us early, as did Innocent of Ford Foundation, and Moki and Chinwe. Each of you has played a role along the way in guiding, inspiring, reinforcing the efforts of the leaders that are leading the APF today. So I want to thank you so much. The most important aspect, but it's also a continent with need, and that's a combination of the opportunity and the need that makes this so compelling. Now, most of you know what the Global Philanthropy Forum is, so I won't dwell on it. It's a learning network of philanthropists who are committed to international causes, and the most important aspect of this network are those in this room. Individuals have chosen to invest, to give, to volunteer in the place where they made their careers, made their wealth. And that decision couldn't be more important. A network is valuable only if it's growing, and Didi will tell you that, the ultimate networker. And so that's one of the reasons that we're so pleased and proud of APF. Having said that, everybody in this room is invited to the GPF as well by virtue of your having been invited here. We'd love to see you in April in Silicon Valley in 2018. We'd love to see you in London. We're making it a little more convenient for some by having it in London in 2019. But in the meantime, I think that everything you learn here, do here, bring from here, invent here, let me just say that I started this trip having made a mistake. And that mistake was that when the woman asked me if I was going home, I said I was not. That's not true. I could not possibly feel more at home than I do today. So thank you. I know there's a keynote speaker, but I don't think I'm doing the introducing.
Thank you very much for that short speech. The 2017 APF Annual Conference keynote speaker is Her Royal Highness, Queen Sylvia of Buganda Kingdom. She is the wife of the King of Buganda, King Ronald Muwenda II. Queen Sylvia is the founder of the Inabagereka Foundation. The foundation carries out charity work for and through the institution of the Kingdom of Buganda. Through the foundation, Her Royal Highness works for children, youth, and women through support for social economic development initiatives. She is a core member of the African Philanthropy Forum and a member of the board. Distinguished guests, now please welcome on stage our keynote speaker, Her Royal Highness, Queen Sylvia of Buganda Kingdom.
Thank you for that introduction. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here in this beautiful, colorful, and vibrant nation of Nigeria. For the first time, it's my first time here. Our distinguished guests, international aid partners, current and potential philanthropists, thank you all for being here today. Your presence indeed gives philanthropy an African face and feel, with a deeper appreciation for homegrown philanthropy, recognizing that you too can transform your giving to make the lives of all Africans much better off. Indeed, the development past, as old relationships between the developed world and the developing nations are evolving into partnerships built around trade and business interests. For our African countries, there's a genuine desire to own and be in control of our development. While we may still need and wish to continue to receive support from it, there is a yearning for assistance that strengthens capacities and nurtures homegrown solutions to Africa's development issues. In 1624, a well-known poet by the name of, English poet by the name of John Donne gave us a phrase. He said, "No man is an island." And he went further to say that I am involved in mankind. Now, this quote frames my brief remarks, which are centered on the Pan-African concept of Ubuntu, its ties to philanthropy, and why organized giving is important. Now, similar to the idea in John Donne's poem, and much closer to home, is the Pan-African concept of interconnectedness between all people. Now, the Nguni language in South Africa calls it Ubuntu. In Eastern Africa, we call it Ubuntu. Now, Ubuntu speaks to a unity that ties us to one another as members of the human race. Yes, it is a Pan-African concept, but it goes much further than that. It is a value that is found in just about every civilization on earth, present and past. Now, in a world where increasingly differences between people, between religions, and between socioeconomic status are often highlighted, the voice of the common thread of shared similarities that bind us together seems to be growing faint. So today, part of why we are here is to make sure that it doesn't happen. Now, if we band together, our collective voice that highlights our similarities will never grow faint. So Ubuntu is about you, it's about me, and it's about us. It's about community, it's about connection, and it's all about caring. So it's community, it's connection, caring. Now, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, in his memoir, No Future Without Forgiveness, describes Ubuntu as a philosophy that says, my humanity is inextricably bound up in yours. That a person is a person through other persons. When we look at philanthropy, we are told the origins of the word lie in the Greek language and that it means love of man. Philanthropy is said to encompass a love of humanity, in addition to harboring a sense of caring and a deep desire to enhance or improve the human condition. It sounds very similar to Ubuntu, doesn't it? It emphasizes community, connection, and caring. Philanthropy is often confused with charity, since both acts entail giving. However, the main distinguishing factor I'd like to point out between the two is that charity tends to occur on a more short-term basis, whereas philanthropy, on the other hand, is more long-term. It is more organized, or in other words, more strategic. The main idea behind philanthropy is to promote the welfare of others. It is not just a quick fix to a pressing need. It goes much deeper than that. Its aim is to positively impact society. None of you in this room today is a stranger to giving. Whether it's a contribution to a church, tuition to students, treatment and care to patients, or simply supplementing an income. We are called upon several times to give to various causes. This type of giving is not a new concept to Africans. Our communities are in fact built on the foundation of reciprocity. Now, for a number of reasons, some of them more obvious than others, philanthropy is a concept that has been associated with the Western part of the world. However, African philanthropic activity has been slowly building momentum and is already well positioned to be a significant factor in the growth and development of many African nations. Now, the African 2016 Wealth Report indicates that there are 165,000 high net worth individuals living in Africa, with combined wealth holdings of $860 billion and personal fortunes in excess of $1 million. Now, this is a proverbial gold mine, not only in terms of the money, but especially in terms of great positive impact a fraction of such a sum can have on African societies. This is where the importance of organized giving comes in. Now, as opposed to having one-off, short-term, unconnected giving, philanthropic endeavors
through foundations, trusts, corporate social responsibility initiatives, and endowments, among others, creates a long-lasting impact, not just on an individual, but on societies as a whole. Now, while it is not yet gained mainstream status, African philanthropy has clearly emerged as an unmistakable contributor in addressing the various challenges faced across the continent. In several instances, where a cash-strapped national government finds itself unable to address a particular challenge, local philanthropists can step in and fill the gap, thus becoming development partners. When you understand the hidden potential that lies with the growing number of African high net worth individuals, coupled with their desire to make a positive and lasting impact on their communities, you start to see why organized giving becomes a crucial issue. To put it in numbers, over the last 16 years, the number of high net worth individuals on the continent has grown by 145%. Now, the great advantage to our societies is that a significant number of these high net worth individuals keep their wealth within their African country of residence. Now, what are the benefits of organized giving? There are several benefits to organized giving. The first benefit to organized giving goes back to the interconnectedness that the Ubuntu philosophy espouses. The community caring and connection. In a world where formalized giving structures are in place, structures governed by legal rules and an ethical code of conduct, tangible links are created between givers and beneficiaries. This link is what actually serves to keep us human, to have us looking out for the disadvantaged members of our societies, to have us constantly reminded that a person is a person through other persons. This link between the giver and the receiver also allows a dialogue to take place between the two entities. Hence, our wealth is put to good use, and in turn, the members of the community have actual needs. They have their actual needs met. Now, the second and perhaps most obvious benefit of organized giving is that it moves society from the quick fix scenarios that many of us are familiar with. I'm sure a number of you can relate to being called upon to contribute to a particular cause, and you willingly do so. However, the following year, you realize that the mechanism that existed that previous year to support the particular cause may have disbanded without bringing much needed results or impact. Now, organized giving, either through foundation, a trust, or an endowment, gives the solution far more longevity than the quick fix you have participated in. Another advantage to organized giving is that structures like foundations, endowments, and trusts, among others, offer a sense of perpetuity to the philanthropic endeavor. That a person's impact on their communities continue to be felt long after their departure from Earth. The fourth and last benefit to organized giving I would like to share with you is that it amplifies the impact because there is strength in numbers. Formal structures like foundations and trusts, for example, also allow everyone, regardless of their income, to participate in making a lasting impact. Now, the focus here is not on the amount given, because for sure, some will give substantial amounts while others may not. The focus instead is on consistent giving. But without formal avenues of consistent giving, the entire society loses out unknowingly. So in looking at Africa's philanthropic landscape, we hear about very generous givers. So we know that our society in no way is short of generous hearts. But what we don't hear about that often are foundations or trusts. There are very few. Now, within this room is a wealth of expertise and network links that would be harnessed into something far bigger than you or I could imagine. So my hope is that this convening will result in the creation of links, networks, and dialogues that the African Philanthropy Forum is ready to support on a regional basis, and the Global Philanthropy Forum on a much larger scale, so that we can actively and sustainably bring about the change we all want to see. I thank you very much for listening, and may God bless you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back on stage the founder of the Global Philanthropy Forum, Jane Wills, who will be moderating the very first plenary for today. This plenary will focus on the role of government in fostering homegrown philanthropy. Please, with a round of applause, welcome her back on stage.
It is? Okay, I need to welcome to the stage then Minister Werner from Liberia.
So I really would love to see APF creating a whole movement where African philanthropy
and Dr. Saifo Moya. Thank you for doing this. Let me just say a word as they're coming up on stage. May I call you Tunde? Do I get away with that? Welcome. As they each come up on stage, let me just say that Bono, the rock star, when he was here in Nigeria a year ago, he was meeting with Mr. Dangote and others. Let me just get the quote of what he said, because he said that the young people of Nigeria are like rocket fuel. There are no limits to how far they can go. They can transform the continent, or they can blow up in your face. Harnessing their energy, every parent in this room knows what I'm talking about. Harnessing their energy requires investment in their education, their employment, their health care. And so we are going to talk this morning a little bit about that investment in each of those areas. But bear in mind that the ultimate goal are individuals who can realize their full potential and make their full contribution to the continent that is Africa. We'll do this in a little bit of order. We're going to be out of order because we don't see Toyin Saraki, but we're going to do it in order of chronology a little bit. We're going to focus on children early, in their early days of life, ensuring that they have a healthy start. We'll talk to Minister Werner about education, the key mover to helping everyone reach their potential, and his focus on improving student outcomes. We'll talk to Mr. Oyebode about employment. And then finally, we will talk to Dr. Moyo about the infrastructure that is needed to make all that happen. So, Minister Werner, we're going to start with you. First, if you would give us a sense of the nature of the problem in Liberia when you came in to take over this role. Perhaps talk about the number of kids that are in primary school, the number of folks that are illiterate. They're the nature of the problem you sought to solve, and then we'll talk about how you solved it.
Well, thank you very much to the African Philanthropy Forum for the invitation. To go straight to the issue, Liberia has a population of around 4 million. So that's a very small population. And I have been Minister of Education for 2 years. Before then, I was head of the public service, and my task was to rehabilitate the entire government post-war. And over the past 12 years, we have grown access by around 1.5 million. At the, thank you, yes, yes. At the primary level, because of President Sirleaf's leadership, we emphasized that all kids should come to school, but placed more emphasis on girls' education. So at the primary level, we just about closed the gap between girls' enrollment and boys' enrollment, 49 to around 59%. We also realized that when we did the assessment, that 35% of young women and 21% of young men could neither read nor write. And in rural Liberia, it was worse. It was around 27% young women and 58% young men. When I looked at this, I thought, yeah, we have a problem. And so this is, in short, the situation I found when I went to the Ministry of Education to be Minister of Education.
You had been a school teacher in 5 different countries, including Liberia, but your goal was not only to improve the quality of teaching, but the bottom line is improving the outcomes, the educational outcomes. You entered in some interesting partnerships, and I want to start with the one with, in particular with Bridge Academies, but there's more than that. It's all about creating what we call charter schools, in essence, in the US. So talk about that partnership. What are its its attributes, and is it working?
So yes, as you pointed out, I came to the ministry having worked here in Nigeria as a teacher, in Abia State Marist Comprehensive Academy, in South Africa, sometime in Zimbabwe, in Kenya, and the US. And so I had a background in teaching. So what I saw allowed me to think differently. Liberia, because of a 14-year civil war and Ebola, is pretty behind its counterparts. It wasn't like that before, but that's where we are. And I needed to figure out a system that would not just leapfrog Liberia into the future, but that would improve access to quality in an accelerated way, taking advantage of the advances we had made, not just in teacher education, but in technology as a whole. And as previous speakers pointed out, it occurred to me that to do that, we needed to form a public-private partnership. Now, people carry that as Liberia privatizing its entire school system. No. What we wanted to prove, using philanthropic giving as a catalyst for change, was to bring together proven private providers, combine them with government policy, creating the right environment, so that they could do what government, as somebody said earlier, in my view, is incapable of doing. I don't know anywhere in the world, perhaps maybe for Vietnam, that governments are competent in educating poor kids. I've never seen it. And so we went on a hunt, looking for proven private providers with the credibility to partner with the government of Liberia to improve in an accelerated way learning outcomes for children. We found 8 of them. Bridge International Academies, Rising Academy, Street Child, More Than Me, and there were some that were indigenous to Liberia, Stella Maris School System and the Liberian Youth Network. We contracted them to improve management systems in our schools and gave them, in the first year, 93 schools. And we said we need these deliverables. We need teachers to be showing up. We need learning materials in the classroom. We need students coming to school every day and giving extended instructional time. One of the lowest, if not the lowest, per pupil cost in sub-Saharan Africa, $50 per child per year. That can't do you anything. So what we did, again, through philanthropic giving, was to raise an additional $50 to $60 per child, giving it to each of the partners to improve learning outcome. Over the past 2 years alone, through philanthropic giving, we've raised around 10 to 15 million to reach close to 70,000 children, and there are no fees. Teachers are showing up. There are no more empty classrooms. There are learning materials. And on top of that, we instituted, one of the things, and we'll talk about this maybe, is many people in the world of philanthropy have worked hard for their money. They want to see the impact. And when you are in government, the perception is that you cannot manage money well. Government is easily branded as corrupt. And so what we did was to prove impact by contracting an independent evaluation of the program to provide evidence. And that evidence is out. It shows that children in these schools, in the partnership schools, are learning 60% more than their control group. Group counterparts. So this is the kind of work we've been able to do in the last 2 years, catalyzing change through philanthropic giving.
So with these results, with these outcomes, you would expect this pilot to take off and ultimately encompass the entire school system. But aren't you at an inflection point right now? Tell us where you stand right now.
So it would be nice, and I know there are journalists in here. Tisi was kind enough to give us the statistics on the continent. Where she comes from, Zimbabwe, arguably had one of the best education systems in Africa. It probably still does, but when I talk to my counterparts, and even those who set up the system, Zingai, they tell me Zimbabwe is sleeping. That story is true for all of Africa and the developing world. Populations growing, budgets are shrinking, commodity prices are falling, and so governments are struggling. No government, whether you have oil or gold, is able to fund public education at the level it should be funded to achieve the desired outcomes. A partnership, therefore, with the private sector is a necessity. We, in Liberia, we believe we are providing a model. It's not perfect, but we are providing a model that other governments can look at. If I had my will, thankfully, President Sirleaf is abiding by her term limit, and she will not run for a third term. So my time as a political appointee comes to an end in January. But if I had my will, I would increase private sector partnership for improved learning outcomes in Liberia. Now, you do so at a peril to your own reputation, because the system is being protected by entrenched interests, including teachers' unions. I don't have any, I've been a teacher myself, but teachers' unions often take care of their own interests. Nobody's asking what the child is learning. So we are at a point now where we are consolidating the pilot year, reaching areas where we never reached before. We are at a point where we are thinking, given the impact the first year has had on the entire school system, using what we learn to cascade the lessons for the wider public school system, how far do we want to go and at what scale? I believe Liberia will scale, and if route to do so.
But this is an area where philanthropy can play a role. In your first year, was the funder Optimus, UBS Optimist? Or
so there are many funders in the room. We pulled together a coalition of funders. I think I'm at liberty. Elman is here. UBS Optimus, Vito Foundation. There are many others that came together. London being the capital of the philanthropic world. And we were able to put together substantial money to see this happening. I believe that when there are leaders in the public sector system that are willing to champion change, when the world of philanthropy supports them to catalyze that change, it would have a bigger impact, not just for what they are trying to change, but for the wider continent. So we thank you very much, all of you here, who have, in many ways, given money to this project to succeed.
You know, often people fear that when private sector managers come in to manage a public system, the public purpose is gone. That is not the case. These are schools that take all comers. They're not exclusive. They're for young Liberians. This is an opportunity with a very small investment to take the cost of what will pay for their education from $50 to $100. Let me say it's $7,000 in the US. So this is not hard to meet. And this is an investment in the future. So I don't want to be an advocate, but I do want to congratulate you on all you've done and hope it will continue.
So thank you very much. So I think to situate the conversation correctly, I personally believe Nigeria has got an unemployment crisis. Overall, as a country, we have 35% of the working population either unable to find work or struggling within an underemployment category where the quality of work that's available isn't commensurate to the skill levels of the people. Now, the youth unemployment crisis is even worse. So today we have 49% of all people under 35 either struggling to find work at all or struggling to find work commensurate with their skills. Now, I listened to the minister say, and with all respect, minister, that Liberia has got 4 million people. But the youth unemployment problem in Nigeria has got 18.5 million people. So it's important to understand the context of how many people under the age of 35 are just unable to be involved in productive activity. So this is the disease, and the symptoms we've now seen manifest, whether it's in ethnic crisis, whether it's in insurgency, it's in insecurity, etc. The fundamental problem is that you can't have 20 million people within one country unable to find work. Now that's the problem. The first part, and I think this also speaks to part of the solution. The first part is, as of today, we're even unable to disaggregate that problem at sub-sovereign level. So the numbers you get from a statistical point of view are national numbers. So if you ask me today to say, what's the Lagos story? I'll give you anecdotal evidence, but there's really the hard facts to plan properly isn't available. So the real problem for us is, one, we see that the levers for creating jobs don't exist. Job creation will come primarily from the private sector. Access to finance remains a fundamental problem for businesses, especially small businesses, who are the real engines of growth. So if you are borrowing today at interest rates north of 25% per annum, even if you are successfully able to repay that debt, there's simply no capital to invest in growing the business and therefore employing more people. So that's the first problem. The second problem is also that when you speak to employers, there's a mismatch between the available skills and the job opportunities. So we have situations where employers will say to us, we have the capacity, and I know some private sector employers who say to us within the next 2 to 3 years in Lagos, we want to hire 60, 70,000 people, but we don't know where they're going to come from. When we go into the communities we operate, we find people with poor attitudes, very limited skill, and it still boils down to how they're being educated. So the real challenge I think we're facing is how do we shift the mindset from what is effectively a white-collar employment mindset to growing technical and vocational education. So that's one of the problems we are facing in Lagos. But we've also realized that no matter how much government puts, government funding is simply insufficient to solve this problem. And I think the minister has made the point very clearly about, declining revenues and the quantum of the problem just getting bigger. So, for example, within the Lagos state government, we have a fund where the state government has seeded 25 billion naira over a 4-year period. We're in our second year, and we have fully drawn loans to approximately 6,000 businesses across various technical and vocational courses, approximately 10,000 people. We're doing some work investing in demonstrate credibly that this work is impactful and therefore find partners to support that journey. So I think to summarize, the first thing is that the quantum of the problem is simply too large for governments to solve alone. And it's also the realization from both sovereign and sub-sovereign governments that you can't act in a carefree manner anymore. You need a lot of help, you need a lot of support to even think about the solutions to this problem before even executing. And so government can't sit in a silo and create solutions for private sector operators who are really your levers to improve job creation across the continent.
As you think about both job training and about entrepreneurship, is there any particular emphasis on women in that calculus?
I mean, for us at Lagos State Employment Trust Fund, it's a very women-first philosophy. And this is because generally the cultural framework for entrepreneurship, for asset ownership, has vested a lot of power with men. So women historically have been significantly disadvantaged. Now, our fund has a target to ensure 50%, at least 50% of all our loans are given to women. 50% of all our technical and vocational training programs are focused on women. Today, I think we're at 42%. So, it's not quite there, but definitely. And I think the more interesting part is from our repayment numbers today, women are significantly better borrowers. So there's a 4% difference in the repayment performance between men and women. So for us, that's significant. So there's an economic case for it, apart from the social case.
I'm going to turn to you, Dr. Moyo, and talk a little bit about it. I mean, in the African Development Bank, you've got the broad view. You've also worked at the World Bank. You're a trained economist, a PhD in economics. Your view has to be broader. You have to understand the whole picture, and then the narrow investments within that picture. Education. If Toyin were here, she'd say maternal and child health. If Tundi is say entrepreneurship, training. As you think about the priorities that your member governments face, what does that look like?
Thank you, Jane. Thanks for having me, and good morning, everyone. So yes, I'm coming from the African Development Bank, and there is a phrase or an approach that we have coined, and we call it co-development. And we call it co-development because the challenges of economic development and more importantly socio-economic transformation are just getting bigger and bigger, and the realization is clear that no single institution, entity, organization, government can do it on its own. So the whole idea behind co-development is really just working together. In this context, it's really optimizing that intersection between, public policy, private wealth, civil society, action or activism, and so on. So, let me just give a little bit of my experience, from when I headed the One campaign in Africa as a civil society organization in Africa, and how, what I learned about philanthropy really, and funding for civil society organizations. There are two types of philanthropists, essentially. Those who love what you do and are going to fund it, are going to get behind you. and those who want to drive the agenda. Either way, both are, game changers and influential in terms of, working for development. In terms of the role for government, I think, very specifically, in terms of the government promoting philanthropy in Africa, it's really about creating the policy environment, a favorable policy environment. In fact, I like to call it a sympathetic legal policy tax environment around charities, around donations, around fundraising, the whole sort of infrastructure. And don't get me wrong, a more favorable tax and legal environment does not necessarily mean that it will lead to greater philanthropy, but it does signal the understanding and appreciation of the importance of philanthropy, and that's always a good place to start. So what is needed, I think, from all of us here, depending on where we're coming from, is to really begin to do the advocacy for philanthropy. Philanthropy, the advocacy around philanthropy, I think is very important because that's how we're going to get to the next step and to the next level. But on the part of civil society as well, it's important for me to say this. Civil society also needs to, in a sense, demonstrate the proof of concept. As civil society, I think we need to be more accountable as well, in addition to holding others accountable. We also need to show the value proposition of the work that we do, because even if government creates the sort of sympathetic environment, if the cultural perception of civil society is not favorable, or there isn't enough confidence for what civil society does, then the potential local philanthropists will not come to the table. They will still be far away. So it's really, we need to really start advocating for the role of philanthropy so that it has a favorable environment to work in.
And another key in for
and the Honorable Minister. So infrastructure is absolutely key. Without it, we're really just, tiptoeing around development, if I can put it that way.
So back to public-private partnerships just for a moment.
Yes.
You were very involved with AGRA, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa.
Yes.
And to prove the connectivity point that Queen Sylvia made, Strive Masiyiwa, who's a distant relative of Tsitsi Masiyiwa, such as husband, is chair of the board of AGRA. Tell us a little bit about AGRA, its purpose and its success.
Okay, so I'm not sure that I can speak very much for AGRA because I did attend the AGRA forums every year, but I've never been employed by AGRA. I ran the one campaign at the time that I was involved with AGRA, and now I'm with the African Development Bank. And my boss, the president of the African Development Bank, used to be vice president at AGRA and has just won the World Food Prize for agriculture. So the work that because it's about value chains and what is required to really transform agriculture. They take in all of the research that's done in agriculture. The technology around agriculture, so it's important work that they do, but I don't feel qualified to speak on behalf of AGRA.
So to keep those connections going, you were named by President Adesina, who used to be not only the agricultural minister here, but worked at the Rockefeller Foundation. So we're all connected in the end. Her Excellency Toyin Saraki is here to join us, so do come up on stage. Talking about, oh, now I've learned how to use the mic. Talking about the importance of youth to Africa's future. And so we wanted to cover basically the life. You're focused on prenatal, neonatal, the first 1,000 days of life. How do you assure that kind of health? Minister Warner has been focusing on education. Tunde has been focusing on employment. And Dr. Moyof has to focus on the whole ball of wax. So I wanted to start just to get a sense of your own philanthropy with Wellbeing Foundation, including the structure, because it's a group structure. But first, the initial purpose.
Well, first of all, good morning, everybody, and I'm really sorry I'm late. How can I really start? start? I started in an informal manner in 1991 because I had a terrible birth experience, and I realized about 15 years later that this was very, very common in Nigeria. And I had a very strong sense of social responsibility that felt that government and even individual citizens should be prepared to look